What are the country's top CEOs doing to build extraordinary teams and cultures who thrive even during a pandemic? You're about to take a deep dive into the minds of wildly successful C-suite leaders who are evolving the way that we work in the 21st century. Welcome to this special edition of How to Be Mesmerizing. Hey everybody, welcome to How to Be Mesmerizing. It's Tim Shurr, and in our special Mesmerizing CEO Secrets, we have another extraordinary leader with us today. Shane Jackson is with us. Shane, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tim. It's great to be with you.
It's great to be with you too. So Shane is the president of Jackson Healthcare, a billion-dollar privately held family of 16 healthcare staffing and technology companies that are powered by more than 1,500 associates. He's also a guiding force for Jackson Healthcare's mission of improving the delivery of patient care and the lives of everyone it touches. And he's also an author of the book, Fostering Culture, a Leader's Guide to Purposefully Shaping Culture. I always get excited when we have someone who runs a large organization who talks about culture, and you actually wrote a book on it. So let's start with this, Shane. Your father, Rick Jackson, was the first guy to get paid to help hospitals recruit doctors back in the 1970s, which I thought was fascinating. So tell us a little bit about that and how the two of you turned his early experiences into a billion-dollar organization.
Yeah, thanks for asking, and thanks again for having me. So my dad back in the 70s was in executive search, and he kind of somehow convinced somebody at a hospital to pay him to help them hire a doctor. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't a thing back then, and right. No one was doing it, and so he was able to build a whole business around it. And about a decade later, kind of in the late 80s, he had brought in some outside investors, and those relationships kind of turned sour, and he actually got kicked out of his own company. Mm-hmm. And went on and kind of did some other entrepreneurial things, some successful, some not as successful. Mm-hmm. But fast forward to the year 2000, I had been working in healthcare technology, had gone back to do my MBA, and had a job lined up to do consulting and mm-hmm. And he came to me and said, "Hey, instead of doing that, why don't you come work with me?" And the vision at that time was to really focus on healthcare services, mm-hmm. kind of starting in healthcare staffing, which is where his background was. Yeah. But healthcare services, and leverage what was then the new novel thing of this thing called the internet. And how do we leverage specifically internet technology to marry it up with healthcare services to create differentiation and better service for our customers there. And so that's really kind of what we were doing, and to some extent that really frames our strategy still today. That it's the combination of what we call high tech and high touch. Great technology and then great human expertise to be able to add value to that process, and it really kind of drives all of our strategy and how we think about our markets today.
Yeah. So what was it that caused you to tell your dad yes? Because I've got two boys, and they have no intention of doing anything with dad's business.
Oh yeah, wow, good. What a good question. I have to think back 22 plus years on that, because it's been a while. Yeah. I think I'm kind of like him, an entrepreneur at heart, and honestly, the idea of getting in and starting something and having the opportunity to really put my thumbprint on something versus going and working at a giant company and kind of being a cog in the wheel, it just mm-hmm. It really appealed to me. And being in that time of my life, it was a little bit of risk doing it, but that's okay. And so I think I've always been someone who just and creative, and I love the creative process, and so the opportunity to create and build something just really spoke to me.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So well, when you look back, it was a good choice.
Yeah, it worked out okay.
Yes. So So Jackson Healthcare, right, comprises 16 different companies, 1,500 people. That's a lot of moving pieces, right? And a lot of times people feel like when they become really successful, it's harder to keep the culture in place. And so how do you keep your messages flowing all the way down to every single associate without it getting diluted or without other leaders kind of putting their own spin on it? How do you keep that all in place?
Yeah, it's a significant challenge. And I would say, for us with the incredible growth we've had, and even, the numbers you're using are already out of date. I mean, we're now already approaching 1,700 internal employees.
Wow.
Our external medical staff that works for us all around the country, I think, is approaching like 15,000 people.
Oh.
And it's a just tremendous growth. And as you said, it's a challenge as new people are entering the organization. How do you keep awareness, much less alignment, on those core values and beliefs? And this problem that you're bringing up is really what led me to the book. And it was indirect. This was several years ago now, but I had just moved into the role of president of Jackson Healthcare. Before that, I was running one of our companies, and my father asked me to move in this role because he didn't want to be in the day-to-day of the business anymore. And so I right after that was out speaking, and kind of a local event. I don't remember what I was talking about, but at the end I took questions, and somebody asked me a question. They said, "Hey, you guys have grown, and you've won all these awards as best place to work and all that. Can you tell us about the culture of your company?"
Yeah.
And I consider myself a fairly well-spoken individual. I can kind of talk to most topics. And this should have been a softball, because we talked about, oh, we got this great culture we wanted to be. But I was absolutely speechless. I didn't know how to answer that question. And I remember driving back to the office after that and really being scared, truly scared, because at this time, again, we were growing fast. We were going through this leadership transition. And I thought, if I don't even know what our culture is, how am I going to sustain it? How am I going to enforce and strengthen it and all that sort of thing? And it set me on this journey of saying, not only do I not know what our culture is, I don't know what culture is. And that's what kind of led to a lot of research and reflection on what culture is. It's what led to the book. And so I can say, and we can talk more about this, but how do I do that today? It's a huge, huge focus on the values and beliefs that we have as an organization that drive all the things that we do, all the things that we don't do. And a huge part of my job is to make sure that we have absolute clarity on that throughout the organization. And that people understand how they're supposed to take that and apply it to what they do. And that includes not only making them aware and training and kind of all the stuff they do once they get here, but it's to the greatest extent we can possible to make sure that people understand what some of those core things are before they come. So once they get here, there's already some kind of alignment. And we do that through a lot of different methods. But that was actually the purpose of the book. I tell people the book was written for an internal audience. The sole reason I wrote that book was so that our leaders understood what some of those core values and beliefs are.
Yes.
It was really never intended to be read by people outside the company.
Yeah.
Once we published it and stuff, and some other people started reading it, they're like, "Hey, this is actually got application to me, even though I don't work in your company." And so, we've had a lot of people buy it and read it, and I think get some value from it. But that's what it was intended to do. And so, some of those philosophies that I espouse in that book are the basis for a lot of things we do to sustain our culture.
Yeah, that's smart. Yeah, that's very cool that you created an internal manual, really, so that instead of repeating yourself 1,000 times, although a big part of staying in alignment is having your core values embedded in the language that you use.
Yeah. Right.
So as you know, and then to have that book and you're like, all right, here, you got to read this, right? And then start to live it. And then, it's a real compliment for others to get value from that as well. Yeah. So a lot of companies have, several core values, and it becomes a little challenging when you have so many of them. So people tend to say, well, you should have 3 to 5. But is there one that you feel really you emphasize more than anything else? Like Southwest Airlines, it's about affordability. That's their one word, right? I've had other companies where they said kindness, be kind. No matter what else happens, be kind. That's the number one. They had 5 different values, but be kind in every interaction, because it just breeds clarity.
Yeah.
And so is there one for you that you try to get across?
Yeah, there is. So we have 3 that we talk about a lot, but the number one value, the one we talk about the most, and we say this is our primary value, is what we call others first, which is just simply thinking about others before yourself. And that's not new. We didn't make that up.
Right.
But the reason we talk about it is because everything really starts there. And people think about this as a kind of relational value. And it is. I mean, if you're in a relationship with someone, in your marriage or friendships, whatever, like really thinking about that person's needs before you think about your own, it's like a really good marriage tip, right? I mean, it's important. But for us, this isn't just a relational value. It's an operational, it's a strategic value. This is how we think about our business.
Yes.
Is for our customers. Like, what do they really need? Like, what is their real problem? And really understanding them, and then saying, okay, now how can we help them? Versus what a lot of people do, a lot of businesses do, is say, we have this solution. Let me go convince some people that they need it. Right. Working in reverse. And so it turns out that just like thinking of others first is good in your marriage and relationships, thinking about your customers first, what they really need, is really, really good for business. And so it has a lot of application, but that's the one you hear the most about. It's the one we talk the most about. And we think that it is the really probably the primary reason, that whole mindset is the primary reason behind our success.
I love it. I love it. Even in communication, seek first to understand, then be understood.
Yeah.
So, my specialty is unconscious beliefs, right? And our beliefs are what influence our habits, why we do what we do, how we react, and how we respond. It really controls so much of our behavior from behind the scenes. And a lot of times people will say, well, yeah, we want to take care of others, but what about me? And so in that situation, it's really nice, because if they feel like they can focus on their customers, because they feel like you and your executive team are focusing on them, right? Your employees are your internal customers, right? So everybody gets taken care of, because when we talk about being others focused, the number one point of resistance for most people is, well, what about me? Right? Like the customer is always right. Well, yeah, but not always. And what about me? And so I've seen organizations that are focused then on, well, our employees are the ones who are number one, not customers, because when we take care of them and make them feel like they're number one, they're going to make others feel that way. And so it's just different semantics, but the essence is the same. Focus on caring about the person in front of you and find out what they need, not just what you want to give them. And then just keep building that relationship, and it's going to come full circle.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a saying that I like a lot that says there's no limit to what you can get everything you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want.
Yeah.
Right? And I tell people, like, this concept of others first, like, even if this isn't just kind of intrinsic to you and just something that you kind of feel, whatever, it's a brilliant business strategy. I mean, it's, if you really understand what someone wants and you can provide it for them, you don't have to worry about it. You're gonna win out of that as well. And and I think also another part of this for us is helping people understand what it is to win personally. Right? It's, well, what about me? Okay, yeah, but what does that mean? Like, what does success mean for you? How do you define that?
Yeah.
And that's part of what a lot of people miss. And so what we default to is, okay, well, how do I win now? Like, what feels the best to me right now? How do I get the most out of this transaction, whatever, versus having a more long-term view of, well, okay, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what will I wish I had done? What will success in my life feel like then? And as I look back on my life, what will I say I was successful or not, and because of why? And going through that viewpoint, and this reflects really another one of our values, I think kind of helps that as well, is that that interaction I'm having with you right now. I'm serving you, but what does this do over the long term?
Yes, I love that. So you're asking really great questions to help people get clarity on what it is that they want to have happen, or how they want to feel, each day, and look at it as a long-term relationship that you have, instead of just in the moment. Right. Yeah. So I really like that. You can find the answer to any question, and so the point is, ask really great questions. I call them power questions. And so you just demonstrated a few of them, which was really good.
Yeah, I love that. We have one of our sayings here is, and I've got a guy who's been a longtime mentor of me, and actually my father. He's been on our board forever, and it's one of the things we say about him is he doesn't always have the best answers, but he almost always has the best questions, and that's so much more valuable.
So much more. Yeah, for sure. And because you don't want to show up giving answers. People support what they co-create. So if you show up having a real interest and asking the right questions, people will give you better answers than you could have given. And, and they'll also support it because they helped to create it, or it came from them.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Outstanding. So, all right. Well, you brought it up a little bit. And the last time we talked, I really loved it when you postulated that question, what is culture? And so, and you do have the answer in your book, Fostering Culture. But can you give us some tips on, on what culture really is, and then, maybe some specific things that you do to help?
So my definition of culture is the atmosphere that results from the actions a group takes to achieve its purpose. The atmosphere that results from the actions a group takes to achieve its purpose. So just a few quick things kind of in there, right? Every group has a purpose. We join a group, we join up with other people because there's something we want to accomplish, some purpose we have, and we can't do it alone. And so we go with other people so we can do it. If we could do it by ourselves, we wouldn't join, but there's something, we need other people to do. So we have a purpose, we get together to do this. And then there's all these decisions that a group has to make on how they're going to accomplish that purpose, right? How we're going to do this, how we're going to do that, who's going to handle this, all those sorts of things. And all those decisions, all those actions, the things we decide to do, the things we decide not to do, they result in kind of this atmosphere. And like one of the ways I think about culture is, what does it feel like to be a part of that group at that time? And I really like this word atmosphere, what it feels like. We kind of get this, and you hear this like with sporting events sometimes, where you maybe even hear an announcer, on TV say the atmosphere is electric in the stadium, right? It's just like you kind of get what does it feel like? And so, but what it means is then we know how to behave in that environment. These are the things that we do and we don't do. And we're talking about culture sometimes, and we don't realize it when we say things like this. Oh, we would never do that here, right? Talking to somebody new, or let me show you how we do that. It's just simply kind of how we do things. And so that all leads to this environment where people know how to behave. And so then the question is, and we kind of already alluded to this, is, all right, that's all fine and good, but why do people do what they do? Why do some groups make choices and other groups faced with the same question, same problem, make other choices? I mean, it's really interesting to me if you think about two businesses, two organizations in the same industry, essentially trying to accomplish the same thing, but they make totally different choices on how they get there. Their cultures are different, their strategies are different, like all that. It's like, where does that come from? And you brought this up earlier, but it's really based on the collection of the group members' values and beliefs. Those values I define as a principle that holds great worth. These things that are really just kind of hardwired to us, that when we act in accordance with them, we feel good, we feel whole. When we do something that's against our values, we feel discord, we feel guilt. And then beliefs are things that we think are true or that work, right? And we all have these things we just picked up, like, oh, this works, or I tried that doesn't work, right? I mean, we have those, and we bring them in, and groups synthesize on the common ones. And to the extent that you join a group, even if you have a common purpose, but they're doing it in a way, their actions, the way they're doing things are different than the way you believe things ought to be done, then you'll leave the group as soon as you find another group that is more aligned with your values and beliefs, right? So practically then, the way the rubber meets the road for us is, as I said earlier, we want to create great alignment and awareness, and really awareness, so that we get alignment on some of our core values and beliefs. And so the book was really documenting this, but it comes to life through a lot of ways, through training that we do, leadership training that we do, really a focus a lot on our leaders and helping them, understand where these come from. And a lot of that for us shows up as storytelling. Like, if you think about the way that we learn, I like this phrase. I picked this one up from my dad. Most lessons are caught, not taught. We don't. Most of what we learn isn't from reading a book or a lecture. It's from experiences, right? Because then we have all the context and understanding and the immersive nature of the experience. If we don't get an experience by being around other people and doing through things, then a lot of it is through lore. It's storytelling, right? Because it's then in that story you understand the context around it. And so we focus a lot on storytelling. We focus on and really try to train our leaders on, hey, don't just, when you're in a situation, you got to make a decision. Don't just make the decision. Help the people around you understand how you got there. Yes. Right? Why you're doing it. Use the language of our values. Use the language of our beliefs, so that next time when they're faced with a situation, you're not there, and it's a new situation. They know just not what to do, but why we do it, so that they can approach that. The final thing I would just say on this real quickly, I'm sorry, I know this is long.
No, it's awesome.
It is, one of the questions I get from leaders when I speak on this is like, okay, this is great. Like, how do you create this kind of culture and all that? And if you want a culture with a lot of alignment of values and beliefs, a lot of people who are aligned on that, and they communicate well, and all that sort of thing, how do you get there? And the thing I tell them is, the best way to get a group of people aligned on values and beliefs is to start with individuals who are aligned on values and beliefs. Yes. Which is like, okay, that sounds kind of dumb. But the problem is it's like, these things are really hard to change, right? Yeah. Values, especially some of your hardcore beliefs, they're really hard to change with people. Yeah. And so what that means for us is that we want people, even when they're considering joining our company, when they're considering even applying, we want them to know what those things are, so that they can look at it and say, oh, that really aligns with what I believe, or no, that doesn't jive with me. That's not the place for me. Yeah. Right. So the more awareness they have, people will self-select out or self-select in that have alignment there, and that helps drive cultural strength.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of times I'm brought in to work with a company who's decided to transform their values, right? So they have already hired people that are used to a certain way. And often, your culture, if you're not intentionally creating it, you still end up with a culture, maybe just not the one that you want. Right. And people follow their leaders. And so when we start transforming leadership teams, there is a lot of resistance. Like you said, no, we've always done it this way, or they don't trust what's going on, or, they're afraid they're going to look bad. And there are occasions where I've had the CEO call me up, and he said, now you said that, we might have a couple leaders leave because we're changing our values and they don't fit with that. He said, we've had 3 people leave. You're sure this is going to be okay? And I said, yes, because they weren't fitting with your, where you want to go anyway, or they were kind of part of the problem instead of the solution. And when you look back 5 years from now, you're going to see that it opened a door for people to come in that are embracing these values, that were excited about it. And of course, we would create internal cheerleaders, like you said as well. There were so many great points that you brought up, Shane, that people can model. You find people who already are embodying those values, and you make them your cheerleaders. You make them a part of the advisory team. You bring them in with the other supervisors or managers or executive team, so they feel like, wow, this is really, I feel included and special. And they're the ones who are rallying when the leaders aren't looking. Right? They're the ones who are rallying the troops and keeping things going, and keeping people living those values and sharing the stories and keeping that energy alive. When we're looking somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, really, really great idea.
Tim, I really like the word you use there, intentionality. And what you said is so true. You have a culture in your organization.
Yeah.
The question of, is the leaders the one that you want or not? Right. Yeah. And what are does it reflect your actual values or your spouse values and all that sort of thing? But another way to think about this is, and because talking about the turnover that occurs, right? This is challenging for people. Like, we're saying we're valuing this, but if we put these decisions into place, these policies into place because of those values, I know I'm going to lose people.
Yeah. Often it'll be like your number one person too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And so, which test, what do you really value and what do you not?
Yeah.
But the other way to think about it is, what happens if you aren't intentional, purposeful, and consistent about applying your values? And one of the things, like, often we use language around culture, good culture and bad culture. Oh, they have a really bad culture, right? Oh, it's really good culture. And I found that's actually not typically helpful. What generally we're saying they have a bad culture is they have a culture that doesn't align with my values, right? But what I do think is helpful to think in terms of strong cultures and weak cultures. And by strong cultures, what I mean is you have a lot of alignment and consistency on adoption of values and beliefs and the way that they're applied. In weak cultures, what that means is that you have great differentiation of value and beliefs. And so the decisions and actions that are taken are very different, are very inconsistent. Well, so what does that mean? First of all, as a customer of a company like that, it's super frustrating because you never know what you're going to get. But as a member of a group like that, it's also very frustrating because you don't know how to act, right? Remember, first culture is, how do we do things? How do I handle the situation, whatever? In a weak culture where there's inconsistency of values and beliefs and how they're applied, I don't know how to act. I don't know how to behave. That leads to personal insecurity. It leads to great frustration, poor communication, and all those sorts of things. And so I would say, as a leader, as scary as it is to say we need consistency in how we apply these values, the alternative in allowing inconsistency of application is actually going to be a lot worse.
Yes, absolutely. And that is a really great distinction there about the variance and how much alignment you have versus people that are out of sync. That's really, really powerful. So 2 thoughts on that. First, I've gone into many companies who had beautiful glass cases full of awards that they've won for having these great cultures. And then I actually go talk to the people and they're like, I hate it here. Right? Or my supervisor's always, stressing me out, or I'm trying to make a decision and they change their mind every 5 minutes, or I'm not clear on what my objectives are, or they say that we're supposed to do this, but they don't do it that way. Right. And they treat some people different than others. So it's not across the board. You've heard all this too. And so those are the challenges, and that's great feedback because now we know what we need to improve. Right. So the second part of it, which what was the second part of it that I thought was really, really good? Let me see. Where is it?
I'm sure it'll come to you.
It's going to come back.
Yeah, I will say, talking about the glass case with all the trophies.
Yes.
And I do think there are some value to some of those, competitions, and some of them do better than others. But that said, I can't tell you how many times I've seen companies win these awards or be recognized, whatever. And I'm like, man, I know some people over there, and, they obviously cheated or bribed people to take a survey a certain way, or that sort of thing. And hey, maybe that's part of their culture. So you have to be a little
whatever it takes, right?
Right.
Yeah. So the other part of it was that when you talked about specific examples, Right. And I've taken, leadership teams through their core values, and we've had to we usually don't change the core values. We just get clarity on what they really mean. So we'll update the definitions of what that value means. And then we will actually create steps and examples, action steps. This is what it looks like in action. Like you said, you got to have examples so that people know what to do in, similar situations. And the more you have clarity, the easier it is to execute on that. And a lot of times leadership teams will complain because they're like, even though it's up to them how fast we get it done, but there's so much variety in what people think that a value means and what it looks like in action, that there's just so much debate about it. And I'm just my goal is to take unconscious processes and make them conscious, right? So the fact that you're sitting here with your whole leadership team and nobody can agree on what that value looks like in action is the problem. And so, and then when they finally get to the end of it, and they have this clarity, because leaders, think that we're just going to do it on the fly because we're always about how fast we can get things done, as opposed to the quality and really essentially focusing on one priority that really matters more than the rest, instead of having, here's our 10 top priorities, even though the word priorities means singular. And so, but once they have that blueprint, then to be able to introduce that into their departments, saves years of time, because you have one story now, and you have the same story that you keep sharing over and over, and then people get it, and then they know, okay, this is how you respond when this happens to a customer.
Yeah. So Tim, a phrase you use there, I think is so powerful, is and I think this is the words you use, that you're focused on taking unconscious actions and making them conscious. I think those are the words you used.
Yeah.
And there's so much power there, but it also speaks to what is probably the kind of objection, I guess, that I hear most to everything that we're talking about here. And so I this was about I don't know, it was about last summer, about a year or so ago. I was speaking at this event. It was actually the first live post-COVID speech I'd given. And I had someone come up. I was kind of speaking about culture and some things we do and all that. And I had someone come up to me afterwards, and very successful retired gentleman, had run a company that, in the Southeast you'd know of and all that. And super just accomplished individual. And he said, he said, I did a lot of the things that you're talking about. He said, but I just didn't know that I was doing it. It just came very naturally to me.
Yeah.
And I said, I have found that most really good leaders, a lot of this that we're talking about is intuitive. Right? It is. Here's the challenge that I found with that, is that intuition doesn't scale.
Right.
And
That's exactly what I was thinking.
This is back to the question that you opened with, is that how do you do this across a big organization and get consistency and all that sort of thing as new people are coming in? Right. Is that, for that CEO, and he gave me a couple examples. I go into meetings, I do this and say that, whatever. The problem is, once you get to a certain size, you can't use your personal influence on everyone throughout the organization.
That's right.
And so the ability to scale yourself, you've got to be intentional. You've got to use the vocabulary, and all that sort of thing in the things that you do in order to get it, or you start getting great inconsistency. And so that's what I think what you're saying, taking those subconscious actions. We do these things. We don't even know we're doing them. We do them. But when you make them conscious, when you make them intentional, when you make them purposeful, that's when you can scale and have a lot of power.
Well said. Well said. So when I was training therapists and coaches and teaching them my one belief away method and rapid transformation, I had to learn how to break down what I was doing into strategies, formulas, and systems, because my coach told me, he says, Tim, you're great, but you can't teach personality.
Right.
You can't teach people how to be you. You have to teach them how to be themselves, and then use these formulas, to create successful outcomes. And so, I 100% agree with that. I love how you said that.
I'm going to steal that, by the way. You can't teach personality. I like that one.
Yeah, that's right. You take it. So, all right. So you once said that, and I really like this, which is why I turned it into a question, but you once said that how a person on your team handles an upset customer reveals what your culture is really like. So Talk about that a little bit more, because I really love that.
Yeah, this is an example I like to give where, again, when you're talking about things like values and, these beliefs, people tend to put those in this kind of relationship bucket. These are kind of mushy things that, I feel good about and think about here's how I'm going to relate to my coworker and all those sorts of things. And they are those, but they aren't limited to that. And this is just something I just kind of found over the years is that this situation that happens in any kind of business, like, no matter how good you are, eventually, occasionally, you're going to have customers that are upset with you.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes because they're just unreasonable and they're horrible people, whatever. But then sometimes it's going to be because you screwed up. Like you didn't do what you said you were going to do, whatever, that sort of. And so, and the reason I like this example is because it tests what you really value.
Yeah.
The way you really define success, how you handle that situation. Do you approach it from how am I going to, make the most money in this transaction? Am I approaching it from, I don't care what you say, or I only care what you say, maybe even though it's not actually good for you or good for the bit, like how do you approach that situation and what's the decision that you make on it? I think it really demonstrates a lot of the things that you actually value of when organizations are faced with that type of kind of crisis situation.
That's so good. Yes. So that, that's a wonderful reframe that I use as well. So if somebody says, well, I had this really difficult customer, I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Good for you. And then they're like, why? And I'm like, because it shows you where you're at.
Yeah.
Right. It reveals the story you have going on in your mind about, are you making it personal? This person doesn't know you. Right. Are you apologizing? I remember I was working with 350 customer service reps at a gas station, at a utility company. For people would call up and say, you turned my gas off, right? So not a gas station, but, and they would be so upset. And I would say, well, there's two words, magical words that will diffuse the most angry of person. Just say, I'm sorry. And they would be like, I'm not saying I'm sorry. I didn't do it. It's not my fault. You should have paid your gas bill. And I'm like, well, if that's how you're coming across, that's why I'm here. And so again, everybody has these running stories in their mind based on the beliefs that they absorbed when they were little kids that they did not even know they absorbed. And it's influencing them as adults. And so that's why, when we talk about making these unconscious beliefs or these unconscious values, another issue that companies will have is that they have these values and people say, well, I'm going to live the values here at work because I have to, but I'm going to do what I want at home. Right. And I find that people have a lot of stress that comes with that because it's very difficult to wear two hats, your work hat and your home hat. People think they have that in their mind, but it's very stressful and it creates a lot of frustration. And usually what happens is people will make a derogatory Facebook post about the company or something, and then it ends up not being a good fit anyway. So when you are, I work for another company that they were all about service. Right. So it was really cool that they invited me in because they were a service training company. They were known. And, their tagline was businesses don't grow, people do. Right. So they focused all the time on growing their people. And then I came in and taught them the cool mind tricks and all the stuff that I teach. And so and they really grew rapidly from that. And the reason I'm telling you this is because even when we put a lot of training and development into our people, they still have so many beliefs in there, and so and stories that are holding people back and causing them to get stressed because we don't know what's going on in home and in their relationships or with their family and the personal struggles that they have maybe with their health and stuff. So culture isn't just something you do and then you're done. I mean, it's all about keeping the conversation going. So are there some tips that you have for how you continue to keep the conversation going? Do you have weekly huddles or monthly huddles or book clubs, or how are you doing that when you have all these companies that are spread out?
Well, we do some things kind of like that, but I want to pick up on something that you talked about that I think is really, really powerful on this topic, that people have all these beliefs that are subconscious that they don't No.
Mm-hmm.
So as strange as it sounds, from someone who, literally wrote a book about organizational culture and that values and beliefs drive that, it is actually more important for the individuals in your company, in your group, in your organization, for them to be aware of their values and beliefs than it is for the organization to state their values and beliefs. And there's been some research that's been done on this that measures the commitment of people to the group, and they looked at that and measured the clarity of the organization's values and knowledge of that versus the individual's knowledge of their own values.
Yes.
And the net of the research said that it doesn't really matter how clear the organization is about their values. All the bang for the buck in increasing commitment of the individual to the group, almost all of it is based on their personal awareness of their values. Right?
Yeah.
And so, again, if you think about it, when you join a group, you enter this process, like enculturation, right? It's figuring out what we do here, and you're trying to answer the question, am I going to fit in here? Right? Do I fit in?
Yeah.
And whether that's conscious or subconscious, you're kind of going through this process and going, oh, I like how they did that. I don't like how they did that. That's not comfortable for me. That is whatever. And so, and until you figure out subconsciously if there's alignment, you've got your guards up, right? Until you finally go, oh no, this is like these are my people. Now I'm in, and now I'm committed.
Yes.
So if an organization is coming and saying, oh, we value this and others first and that and whatever, but you don't know what you value, you can't make that connection.
Yes.
If you know what's really important to you, you'll figure it out, even if they don't say it in someone else. Yeah. And so as a person, as an individual, the power of knowing that is knowing, what do I want to commit to? Yeah. What are the groups? What are the movements? What are the things that I want to be involved with? And instead of taking a while to figure that out, because I don't really know what it just doesn't feel right, I don't know, whatever, of going in and having that self-awareness and then being able to purposely look at it, it saves you time and it enables you to spend more of your time in things that are in alignment with what you're trying to achieve in your life.
That's exactly right. You said it so well, Shane. That's what I've been doing for 20 years in my private practice. And then it was producing such exceptional results, helping people to have this awareness that they didn't have before, these drives that were driving them that they didn't even know why they were felt that way, and sometimes they would act and they didn't want to act that way. And yet they're like, what's wrong with me? I know better, and then we go and do the exact same thing. And it's because of those unconscious beliefs and drivers. And so when I'm I have this vision of a new way that we approach work, and I'm hoping in the 21st century it continues this way, because the old 1900s, industrial revolution was all about how can we get the most out of everybody and turn human beings into factory workers, and we just crank out the most amount of productivity. And when the pandemic hit, it forced a lot of people to slow down and get off that crazy train and actually breathe and actually hang out more with their kids and actually get a little caught up on their rest, in spite of all the horrible things that went along with it as well. A lot of people had that belief. A lot of leaders that I worked with had the belief that I don't have enough time to train my people. I can barely get my own stuff done. And it was this constant tug and war between our core values, living our values, and hitting our numbers. And it was this constant, it was never an and conversation, right? And I went in there and I wanted to change that. And I believe that companies now can grow people. And as you're growing people through having the conversations that we're having and putting processes in place and talking about culture, so that you're measuring profit by how happy your people are, the atmosphere around you, how you're taking care of the planet and profit in your bottom line. When you're looking at all of that, it is something that will end up making you so much more money than having a workforce that is completely stressed out or burned out. So, these conversations, that's why I'm doing this interview and taking the principles that you have and how you're doing it and getting it out to the world, because there's a lot of corporate leaders out there that they're not going to listen to me, but they'll listen to you. right?
Well, I know about that, but so I talk about this in the book. We have this phrase, working on the business versus in the business.
Yes.
Right. And so, in the business, I call it the tornado. I think what's his name? Chris, the four disciplines of execution calls it the whirlwind or something. Anyway, but it's just all the stuff we got to get done every day. Right.
Yeah.
And keep going and going and going. And to use your industrial revolution analogy, is productivity. Right. We're just going to do more and more and more of the same thing.
Yes.
Right. And so, and by the way, productivity is not bad. We got to be productive and efficient and, all those sorts of things. Those are important.
Mm-hmm.
But that's working in the business.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is, if you don't ever take the time to work on the business, then what you're doing in the business can be the wrong thing. And I tell this story, I'll tell you real quick. This is in my book. Mm-hmm. So I did triathlon for years, mm-hmm. and triathlons start with an open water swim. Mm-hmm. And I used to love, you go to triathlon, you could always tell the newbies on the swim. Yeah. And the reason you could tell is because they ended up in the wrong place, right? Because when you're swimming and you're training in a pool, there's this line on the bottom and you just look down and you just swim, right? And so you're just face down and you're just going. When you get in open water and, lake and the ocean or whatever, there's no line.
Right.
And so what people do is they swim the way they trained, and they're just heads down and they're just going and going and going, and they're super efficient. They got the right body and the arm angle and all that. They're super efficient in what they're doing. They're highly productive. Mm-hmm. But guess what? All of a sudden they look up, they get done, and they've missed the target completely. Mm-hmm. What experienced triathletes, experienced open water swimmers learn to do is to sight. And so what they know is that they're swimming and they're being real efficient, but every few strokes, they've got to get a little inefficient. They got to come up, take a pause, look to see where they need to go and realign to where they're swimming, right? Yeah. It's not productive, in terms of, swimming fast or whatever, but it's important. That's what we've got to do in our organizations. And I would argue to you that if you say you don't have time to train your people, you don't have time to think about, are we doing the right thing versus are we just doing things right, that you're going to end up being highly productive at completely ineffective things. I would say you don't have time not to do that stuff.
Oh, highly productive in ineffective things. That's really good. Yeah, that's really good. And when we're talking about, well, it's not very productive. Well, if you end up in a different spot, how productive are you? So it's your compass. Right. It is productive to be able to pause and work on your business and look at the way that you spend your day. And can you optimize your time management or how I'll be working with the executive team one day, and then the next day I'll be working with the sales team. And it's the same message, right? It's about how, the activities are different, but how you're spending time. And you got 5 different processes or applications that you have to be keeping up with. And so many people waste so much time because they're not thinking about that. They're just trying to get stuff done. Right. And, I always remember, I can't remember where it came from, but the idea of how horrible it will be to climb so high up a ladder and then recognize that it was leaned up against the wrong building.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And I thought that scared me. And so I have forced myself, and a lot of really talented leaders. I was just reading an article about, the leader of LinkedIn and the leader of Twitter, and they schedule, Bill Gates, they schedule time during their busiest times for just 2 hours to sit there and think and not do anything. And crunch time, when all the alarms are going, and they're like, well, I'm going to be gone for a couple hours, right? Or I'm going to take a week off. Bill Gates takes a week off, but he's in a different space. And so, but I thought that's so valuable because our best ideas come when we're not working, and that I feel is productive. You get our best ideas when we're in the shower, right? And then all of a sudden, because we're not working. And so, some of the greatest discoveries that we've had from Sir Isaac Newton or from Einstein, they were just napping, and leisurely hanging out. And all of a sudden they had these insights and these breakthroughs. And so I create space for me not to do anything and then I just kind of listen. Instead of trying to figure it out. All right, what do I need to do here? And what's going to happen here? And trying to forecast and trying to learn from the past. I just get quiet. And I feel that is as productive as another item checked off my to-do list. So one more question for you, because this has been outstanding. So you're in healthcare, right? And we've been going through a pandemic. So I can imagine, I can't imagine what it's been like for you and how you're keeping everybody, secure and resourceful. I know the first thing I did the summer of 2020 was I started doing virtual trainings, leadership trainings for fire chiefs around the country, because a lot of them were really scared that they were going to run out of supplies. They weren't going to have enough resources. They weren't going to be able to do their job effectively. And those men and women really have high ethics and standards about doing their job correctly. And so I did a lot of programs to support them as we were going to get through this. And so I know you're going to say we relied on our culture and our training. So where are you at now, and what have you learned through going through this?
Well, it's like the last 2 years, starting in March of 2020, have been tough for a lot of reasons, a lot of people, uniquely for those of us in the healthcare industry. And it's interesting, you're talking earlier about people kind of during the pandemic who have had the time to rest, to spend time with their family and that sort of thing. For a lot of us in the healthcare industry, it was exactly the opposite. I remember back in the spring of 2020 and, kind of talking to some of my friends, and they're just like, man, this has actually been really great. I've reconnected with my family, all this. And I was saying, I have what I would describe as almost a dream. I have 3 kids and my wife, and they're all like locked in the house with me. Like none of us can go anywhere. All that. And during that time, I saw my kids less than I did normally, because it just the need for care and the just turmoil in our industry was tremendous. And I mean, we had people just working 7 days a week for months and months.
Yeah.
And it was really tough. And so our challenge was not, that people were kind of taking all this time. Our challenge was that people were so stressed that they were not doing things that they needed to do to take care of themselves. And I can tell you, I have literally over the last 2 years forced people to go on vacation. Like literally said, I'm turning off your email. You cannot access it. IT control has changed your password. Go away. Right?
Good for you. Good
weeks.
For you.
Wow,
sort of that's outstanding. That's really good. It's really good.
Well, and so it's, but from a cultural standpoint, the things that we were doing, a lot of it was equipping our leaders with tools to recognize that, with words, with permission to, like, I know you have a lot to do, but it's okay to take a step away. And it was really hard when we're trying to get nurses into a rural area that has been saturated with COVID patients, and there's no one to take care of them. I mean, I can tell you some stories about when we'd show up in the nursing homes, there'd be 100 patients, 70 of them had COVID, and they had one nurse tech taking care of all of them because the rest of the staff had COVID and was sick. I mean, that's a literal thing that happened to us. And so, and we've got a very mission-driven staff. They feel so passionate about what they do and wanting to make all of that happen. And so, how do you take care of them as you take care of others? And so, we've had a lot of discussion on what does it really mean to be others first, in caring for each other and caring for ourselves during this time. And it's been a challenge for sure.
Yeah. One of my larger clients was a hospital right in the beginning of this pandemic. I mean, I've been working with them for a couple of years, so they were ready for it with the values. But I just spent the whole time helping people with burnout and overwhelm and the breakdown, because it's so hard when you're in especially nurses, they're so driven to want to take care of their patients as best as they possibly can, that they will sacrifice themselves over and over again to do it. Then you burn out, and then you can't be there for anybody. And so even just I was sending them audio programs. Listen to this while you're sleeping at night. There's no extra time. Just push play on your phone, lay and play, and let me recharge your batteries, while you're sleeping, so that you can cope with this. So, and it's not over. I mean, my mother-in-law is in the hospital right now, and she needed, she was trying to get out of intensive care into a regular room, and they don't have any space, right?
Wow,
Because they're
yeah.
all filled up with COVID
Yeah.
patients. So
Yeah.
it's very difficult. So where can people learn more about you and find your book and learn more about Jackson Healthcare?
Yeah, well, first of all, to find out about the company, go to jacksonhealthcare.com, and lots of information about us and all our companies there. In terms of finding the book, it's available on Amazon, so you can go buy it there. Just go search for Fostering Culture. But really, the best place to follow me is on LinkedIn, and so I put out content. I usually put out a new piece of content, an article every month about leadership and other information. So follow me on LinkedIn. And in fact, the one I'm working on, I don't know if it'll be next month or the one after, but you'll really like it. I'm calling it the power of daydreaming, and it's addressing just what you were talking about, of taking time to be quiet and just let your mind wander, and how powerful that is. And so anyway, but I put out something like that every month. And so go on LinkedIn and follow me, connect if you want. And that's the best way to do it.
Outstanding. Shane Jackson, everybody. Shane, thank you so much for being a mesmerizing guest on the show today.
So glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Hey, it's Tim. You ever wonder why so many talented, hardworking entrepreneurs and business owners struggle with inconsistent self-belief, or high stress, or procrastination, or self-sabotage? Well, the answer may surprise you, and the solution is already inside of you. I've been searching for the answers to this for decades, and I found them, and I put it into a new program called The Power of Your Unconscious Mind, Mental Secrets for Accelerating Success. And because you're a listener, I want to give you a free VIP copy. Head over to powermindsetprogram.com. That's powermindsetprogram.com and grab your copy today.